All right, big spoilers for Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2. It's theory time. Now, to set this one up, I got to give you a lot of background, so we're going to talk about Kelsier. Starting with the 11th metal, we got to talk about how Kelsier feels numb after Mare's death. He doesn't feel anything until he snaps and he finds his Mistborn powers, and then suddenly he realizes that he has the power to enact his vengeance. And that's what drives him forward. That's what drives him through his training with Gemmel, and that's what drives him into caring about anything. He even specifically notes that he never cared about the ska before. He lived a lavish life. He was half ska, but he lived as a nobleman and he had more money than he knew what to do with. And he didn't use any of that to help Marsh as he was helping the rebellion. No, he only thought about himself and his lifestyle going forward until things went wrong. And that takes us to the Final Empire, that first scene where Kelsier is at the plantation looking to recruit people for the rebellion. He's not there to help them. He's there to figure out a way to trick them into going into the rebellion because that's what he's looking to do to build up his army. And it just so happens that the perfect opportunity does present itself. Kelsier saves a ska woman from being attacked by the nobleman at the plantation and ends up destroying the entire plantation, which forces the ska from the plantation into joining the rebellion because there's nothing else that they can do because they're not free. They'd have to either just go serve at another plantation or they would have to be killed by the Lord Ruler and their cronies because ska cannot be free in this economy. So Kelsier backs them into a corner, and this is pointed out by the leader of the ska there. And unfortunately, this type of manipulation doesn't stop there. As he's recruiting within the city of Luthadel, he holds these meetings and he has the mental allomancy used against these people to manipulate them into agreeing with him as he does his speeches. He doesn't let people come to the rebellion on their own. He manipulates them into it. And then after manipulating them into joining his rebellion, he convinces them that they would have supernatural success and that he would support them even when he's not there, which eventually leads them to trying to take on the garrison on their own to prove themselves, which ends up with the army being decimated other than the small amount of people that stay back in the caves. This is the first real sign that Kelsier is causing real harm by making this cult-like religion around himself. And his friends confront him for it. They say, Kelsier, we're really concerned about this. You're making yourself into a god to these people, and this is not okay. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't know what you're talking about. But that was his plan all along. He had this backup plan that he would end up being a god to them or a martyr to get the rebellion really going if something happened to him. Marsh seems to be the only one who has a real read on Kelsier, but he rolls with it because Kelsier is finally on board with the rebellion that Marsh has been trying to support for years, and he knows that Kelsier has a knack for getting things done. But unfortunately, Kelsier was willing to sacrifice anybody to get what he wanted, and in this book, what he wanted was to take down the Lord Ruler. Not to mention Kelsier's part in the plan, which was to start the house war by cold-blooded murder. He takes out so many nobles just to start chaos. He doesn't have a reason to take them out. He doesn't plan based on who's evil, because let's be honest, he would take out Ellen's dad if he was going by who was the evilest. Instead, it was whatever was going to sow the most chaos between the houses. So Kelsier didn't necessarily have good goals as long as he was just causing chaos, and he didn't mind killing people in the process. Kelsier is a textbook narcissist. He knows exactly what to say, and he's charismatic enough to convince people that what he's saying is the truth, while he continually lies to the crew and everyone around him, as well as the whole members of the rebellion, because that's what will get him what he wants, not the truth. We only see Kelsier as good in the Final Empire because we believe that what he really wants is to save the ska. I personally think that what he really wants is just to take down the Lord Ruler. And if that didn't involve saving the ska, then he wouldn't have bothered with it. And then, of course, in Secret History, we get to see Kelsier decide not to move on to be with Mare. He's tempted to, but really what's more important to him is protecting what's his, which is Scadrial. In this process, we get to see his first interaction with Hoid, where he threatens him in a very scary and disturbing way, which in my opinion is a great example of how Kelsier is a sociopath. And Hoid points out to him that he saved a boatload of people from a fire by sinking the ship, but then just told everybody to be thankful at least they weren't burned. But the ship is sunk now, so now what are they supposed to do? And he didn't care about those consequences as long as he achieved his goal of getting rid of the Lord Ruler. Kelsier repeatedly shows that he doesn't care about the consequences of his actions as long as he ends up achieving his goal. He's like the opposite of Journey Before Destination. He doesn't care about the journey. He doesn't care what the journey takes as long as he ends up at the destination that he thinks is most important. There's some really interesting quotes from Secret History that lead me to again say that Kelsier is a textbook narcissist as well as a sociopath. I'll read some of those to you. He tells Fuzz, the second murder is always easier than the first. He tells Fuzz, I pity anyone who's not me. He thinks to himself, if there's one thing that he's good at, it's lying to himself, which is something that narcissists do to convince themselves that they're doing the right thing. He says that he needed people. Without them, he felt dried out. Again, that's another textbook narcissist thing. They need people around them to fuel themselves and make themselves feel better. Otherwise, they feel drained. And in the end, Vin says that Kelsier became something that worries her. How much was about us and how much was about you? And to wrap up the scary things that he's into in Secret History, he tells Spook, we almost lost everything because of ignorance. So we're not going to let that happen again. And then he talks about how he's wanting to experiment with hemalurgy. You know, the magic system that involves killing people to steal their magic. He may be interested in using already existing spikes, but if you think that you're stopped there, then I think you have a misunderstanding of how far Kelsier's willing to go. Now, heading towards Era 2, Kelsier continues to act as a god. He continues to run his cult, and they end up as an established religion by the time we get to Era 2 with Wax and Wayne, as well as he reaches Southern Scadrial and sets himself up as the sovereign there, sets up a whole religion. They end up building this temple to him so that he can hide the bands of mourning, and it just is an ongoing, repeated pattern that Kelsier says, you know, it worked out before to set up a religion to myself. I might as well do this again and then take control of all these people where he can go back and he can continue to rule them again and again, showing up as the sovereign as needed. Now, again, we seem to agree with Kelsier's goal still. His goal now is to protect Scadrial at all costs as he learns about the greater Cosmere and the things that may be coming for them. That's a great goal, but at all costs, in my opinion, that reminds me a little bit of Taravangian. Now, we know the Ghostbloods on Scadrial are working to counter Trell or autonomy, and Sazed asks Kelsier if he's willing to do the same things as the set, because Kelsier's desire for Metalborn seems to be greater than his desire to do right. And Kelsier pauses and says, do I agree with the set? Maybe I wouldn't use innocence, but other than that, yeah, I kind of agree with them. Even when they invite Marcy to join the Ghostbloods, she asks, so does everyone share their secrets, or Kelsier, do you still keep secrets from them? And he refuses to answer. And eventually she decides not to join because she doesn't think that secrets are in the best interest of her people and the world as a whole. So where does that lead us to with Kelsier? That leads us to the final scene where he has a discussion with Harmony about how he doesn't think that Sazed has anything under control, and he is not sure that he's willing to let Sazed continue to go forward. And he thinks that he sees a dark shadow following Sazed as his other self. Now, Kelsier does note that Ruin has always been stronger than Preservation. Preservation put more of himself into creating the people on Scadrial and the powers. So yeah, Preservation is likely a little bit weaker than Ruin, and there's a lot of people that theorize that Harmony, Sazed, is going to become Discord. And Kelsier directly asks Harmony, will you share information with us? Autonomy shares information with her people, and it's moving them forward in technology while we're staying behind. And Harmony says it needs to happen naturally, otherwise there will be consequences. Once again, Kelsier doesn't seem to care about the consequences. He just wants the protection of Scadrial at any cost. So he says to Harmony, I am going to protect our people at any cost. Please tell me that I don't have to protect them from you. And Sazed says, that depends on what you choose to do, my friend. The prophecy around Discord says he shall be Discord, and yet they shall love him for it. It doesn't say he shall become Discord. It doesn't say anything about Harmony. It just says someone will be Discord, and yet they will love him for it. And Kelsier is an expert manipulator at getting people to love him, despite how he's manipulative, despite how he doesn't actually seem to care for the greater good, despite the fact that his path to what he wants isn't always necessarily morally good. I personally think that that prophecy was talking about Kelsier holding those shards, because as we know, he is more of Ruin than he is of Preservation. And I think he would tip the balance toward Discord. I think Kelsier is probably going to take Sazed out, unfortunately. He no longer sees him as a friend. He says the being that used to be my friend, he is willing to do whatever it takes. And if Harmony is not doing what he thinks needs to be done, he's more than happy to take over and do it himself. What do you guys think? Who's going to be Discord? Also, I think Kelsier is going to be the big bad of the Cosmere, but I got to wrap that up in another video.